Good morning, everyone. My name is Gordon Malcheski, and I'll be your worship associate for today's service. So I want to welcome everyone to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Roanoke. I want to extend a special welcome to any of you who are here for the first time. And I'd like to also extend a welcome to those of you that are joining us on YouTube. For those of you that are joining us on YouTube, if you do have any joys or concerns that you want to share during the Lifelines portion of the service, please be sure to put them in the chat window in the next 15 minutes. Our minister is the Reverend Walter LaFleur, and today's sermon is Known and Unknown. A reminder for everyone, if you would please silence your cell phones, that would be appreciated. So we commit to supporting each other with respect and direct communication as we work in community to explore spiritual growth and to be a force for good in the world. And our words of welcome. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you express your identity, whatever your situation in life, whatever your experience of the holy, as you come seeking love, your presence here is a gift. Whether you are filled with sadness, overflowing with joy, needing to be alone with yourself, or eager to engage with others, all who welcome all are welcome here.
So all the music this morning comes from a set of pieces called From the Southlands, written by H.T. Burleigh. And if you don't know who he is, and it's not a household name, he was an African-American composer who went to a conservatory in New York. And he is pretty much single-handedly responsible for taking the spiritual and putting it into the concert hall. And he wrote classical arrangements for choirs and for voice and for orchestras and for bands because he wanted people to hear this music and wanted to hear it performed. He was also a great friend of Dvorak when he lived here, not here in Roanoke, but in the United States, and really inspired him to put American folk songs into Dvorak's music. And so these pieces are based on poems written by Harry Burleigh's wife, Louise. And what she did was she would take lines from spirituals and then kind of weave them into her own poems. And so he's done the same thing. He's taken melodies from Southern folk songs and so you'll hear a little bit of Stephen Foster and other things and spirituals and then woven them into some classical pieces.
know, there are times in our lives, we have a microphone. You're supposed to be able to hear me. That works. There are times in our lives when we know just what we're supposed to do, yet we find reason not to. There are times in our lives when we feel lost and unsure, and we behave accordingly. And there are times we feel pulled by some force to do what is ours to do, and we begin. May we know the difference. Our chalice lighting words. Verily, verily, I say unto you, today is a new day, ripe with possibility. Choose well.
May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, O Spirit of life.
Good morning. I'd like to invite all young people or young at heart to come up and join me up here. Come on down. There I am. Hi, good morning. So I have something to show off this morning. Look at my shoes. Nice shoes. Thanks, Emma. You got new shoes a couple days ago? Those are not the new shoes. Good to know. Thank you. So these shoes, for those of you who can't see them, does anybody want to get on the microphone and describe them? Sparkly. Bejeweled. They're Vans. Yeah, they're my sparkly Vans. When I was, they're not soaked in olive oil, which is an inside joke from this morning. You'll all get to learn it. They're what? They are lace. They are lace up Vans, very sparkly. They're some of my favorite shoes. And I'm wearing them today because when I was in high school, quite a while ago for some of you, not that long ago for others, when I was in high school, we were in charge of creating a holiday. I know. We made our own holidays. Some people made another National Ice Cream Day. In my opinion, you can't have enough ice cream days. Some people just said, my birthday is now a national holiday, which some of you might want to do. I see it in your eyes. But my friends and I decided we wanted to do a day that recognized that sometimes it gets tough out there. We did a day that we started calling Wear Crazy Shoes Day. And these shoes aren't super crazy. I mean, they're really fun, and they're not necessarily something you'd see in an office somewhere, but they're not super crazy. But we decided that was the day that anybody who was wearing shoes that caught your eye and caught your attention would use those shoes to say, hey, you're safe with me. Hey, I got your back. So if you needed somebody, maybe somebody was picking on you and you needed a friend to stand up for you or stand with you, you found somebody on April 11th, you found somebody who was wearing those shoes. And guess whose holiday stuck around in high school? April 11th. Now they call it Stand Up and Step Up and Stand Out Day. I remember now. But I actually called one of my old teachers who's still there. She's retiring next year. I called her and asked her about that day. And she said they still have that day. And people get really crazy with their shoes. They tie-dye their shoes. They color on them. Some people glue little Fisher Price toys to their shoes. They do all kinds of crazy stuff with their shoes. But it says you're not alone. You don't have to go through all of this stuff we call life by yourself. So we are going to celebrate that day here too. And we are going to go upstairs. We're going to design some shoes. And we're going to show off those shoes. And we are going to bring that day here because everybody needs help sometimes. And we don't have to stand around. We can actually, if we wear those shoes, we say, hey, you're safe with me. I'll be your friend. Y'all ready to go design some of those shoes? Let's do it. Follow my shoes out.
Our reading for today, this comes to us from Donald Rumsfeld, who many of you remember. I guess most of you do remember him. All right. So Donald Rumsfeld at one point said, reports that say something has happened are always interesting to me because as we know, there are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. This is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns, the ones we don't know, we don't know. And if one looks throughout the history of our country and other free countries, it is the latter category that tend to be the difficult ones. The economist John Quiggin wrote, although the language may be tortured, the basic point is both valid and important. The psychoanalytic philosopher Slavoj Žižek says that beyond these three categories is a fourth, the unknown known, that which we intentionally refuse to acknowledge that we know. The main danger lies in the unknown knowns, the disavowed beliefs, suppositions, and obscene practices we pretend to not know about, even though they form the background of our public values.
Don't worry about known and unknown. We'll get through to it. As I was thinking about this morning's sermon, Donald Rumsfeld kept creeping into my thoughts. Now, I admit he's not my favorite American, nor my favorite Secretary of State for that matter. But all that's beside the point. He verbalized a set of concepts that rattled in my sociological mind and that I found tremendously useful over time. We're going to wade into it this morning. This morning's theme is journey, to, from, and what's the clarity of our motivation for our journey? Now I want to use his categorizations to help us frame what I'll be talking about, focusing on a particular kind of journeying. But first, I want to get our feet wet by looking at his categorizations and how they might play out in real life. Let's imagine I want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Now, I've never climbed a mountain anywhere near that high or that difficult. So no doubt I would need considerable amount of research. So the first known is that I've never done this before. I know it will be a difficult expedition, and I know I'll need help, and that there are people called Sherpas who provide that service. I know that at some point I will probably need a source of oxygen because the air gets thin. These are things I know. His first category, known knowns. I also know there's a bunch of things I don't know about climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. I don't know how long it would take. I don't know exactly what equipment I would need. I don't know how much practice or training I'd need to have any hope of success. And I don't know how much it would cost to make such a journey. These are known unknowns. Things I know I do not know. As in much of life, the more one knows, the more question seems to pop up. I don't have any idea what I will discover. What I had no idea about, I just wouldn't know. But I do know there is any number of things, there are any number of things that will surface that may well surprise me. Whatever they are, those things at this point are unknown unknowns. Things I don't know that I don't know. Now, if I include Zizek's fourth category, unknown knowns, deep down I'd have to admit to myself, there's no way in hell I'm going to make this trip. I've got bad knees. I'm not 25 anymore. And goodness knows, I'm out of shape. All that information would have to hide in my unknown in order for me to give serious thought to such a trek. How many times do we know something's not going to work, just ain't going to happen, but we plow ahead anyway? There's something here, I think, about being human, and I think I've seen animals do it, so I think there's just something about being alive where sometimes we just butt our heads and keep going. Now, I hope you can see how the unknown knowns, things I hide from myself or things we hide from ourselves, may well lead to more catastrophic outcomes than what we know we don't know. The unknown unknowns. But the unknown unknowns can also hold a big wallop. So I'm going to recap. Number one, there are things we know. 2, there are things we know we don't know. 3, there are things that are hidden to our current awareness. And lastly, there are things we fool ourselves into believing we do not know. We might call this lying to ourselves. But I suspect more often it's a form of numbing. It's a way we can numb ourselves. It's a way of avoiding unpleasant, maybe even ugly truths. We just kind of tuck it away and we act as if we don't know. For some time now, February has been called Black History Month. Every year, some acknowledgement that African Americans have played a role in American history gets raised up. There are documentaries on television. We hear about Martin Luther King, Frederick Douglass, and sometimes we learn about a distinguished Black scientist that we hadn't heard about before. But good people, this year needs to be different. This year must be different. There's something important about this time, this year, where the country is. There are factors that have come together that make this time fertile. The time is fertile. potential for a turning point in our history of our nation. A time of beginning to heal our long-standing racial divide is within reach. It's at least in sight. But, it's a big but, getting to the mountaintop will not be easy. There is much hard work to be done. Many unknown knowns to be acknowledged, pulled out of mothballs. So many things this country knows but won't admit. These categories will be tremendously useful in our healing process. We can use them. In fact, we need them to develop a treatment plan. We should start by identifying what's known. What we know, we know. Then explore the unknown. Explore the known unknown. Things we know but act as if we don't know and pretend they don't exist. And that's the place in this 4-step model where the hard work begins. Well-intended white people who've done their own work will need to lead the nation to acknowledge there are known unknowns when it comes to race and racism. It's a potential landmine when Black folks point out what white folks really do know, but they act as if they don't. So white folks need to do that work. Maybe the hardest work will be to take our blinders off and begin to address the unknown knowns, those things we've tucked away, put in a closet, pretend we don't know. Those things in our heart of hearts we know to be true and real, but haven't been able to bring out into the light of day. Things we've not been willing to come face to face with. There's a time we need to start doing that. We in this country are on the edge of coming face to face with deeply embedded racism that is foundational to who we are and have always been. The mistreatment of Native peoples, the mistreatment of Africans brought to these shores, the mistreatment of Chinese brought for labor, Japanese, immigrants, and I may have missed some. Ponder that. This is who we are and have been. This is a seminal time in our history that we cannot afford to miss, to capture and leverage for the good of the nation, the good of individuals of all races, for the good of our very souls. We need to understand that Black cops in Memphis, acting as lynch mobs, demonstrate how deeply embedded racism is. That racism is cultural, manifested by those with authority and power, and the responsibility to sustain the status quo. We're at a place and time that I believe is unique in our history. The Civil War was about slavery or civil rights. Our orientation dictates what we see. The civil rights movement was about all civil rights. Race was clearly a foundational element, but at its core, it was about gaining basic human rights, equal rights that would be applicable to women, to gays, to trans folks. Over time, it morphed into a war on poverty and affirmative action. The civil rights movement laid much of the groundwork for the women's liberation movement and later gay rights and equal marriage. We are at a time when the country may no longer be able to avoid coming face to face with the reality of racism. We may be at that point. It's too late for that national conversation about race. That conversation would have only been about race, not racism. The conversation about race is a conversation about race, not racism. It's essential that we know the difference. They're not the same. A conversation about unwanted sexual advances is not the same as a conversation about rape. They're different. DeSantis, you recognize the name, has turned racism on its head, a profoundly effective jujitsu maneuver if you have societal power. It's the black folks who are racist against good old white folks, at least in Florida. Brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Put them on the defensive. Poor but powerful white folks being undone unto. Please help save the white race from feeling badly about themselves. Because they too at some point would be asked to see how race manifests in this country. This approach feeds, it fertilizes the unknown unknown, otherwise a place to hide. Yet, that's the closest we as a nation come to talking about racism. We use some euphemisms. Racial bias. Is that like a preference for tall people or blondes? That kind of thing called a bias? That language comes out of our unknown knowns, things we know but pretend not to. We know there is a thing called racism, but we act and we talk as if it's merely a bias. As if merely a bias. Racism is an animal unto itself. It's a standalone. Race is a category. Bias is a preference. Racism is built upon superiority that leads to denigration and the humiliation of others. As a society, we desperately want to think of racism as a bad attitude held by uneducated, ignorant, backward folks who mostly live in the South. The them. We do not tend to think of corporate managers or our next door neighbor holding beliefs of white superiority. Manifested culturally, intellectually, experientially, superior, otherwise known as racism. All known unknowns lurking in the shadow. Things we know, but we act as if we don't know, hiding in the shadows. We don't tend to, are unwilling, more to the point, to see racism as foundational to who we are as a nation. That all of our social systems and constructs have grown out of that very fertile soil of racism. All. For the most part, racism in America lives in the unknown known, the place where we know but we act as if we don't. Or maybe in the unknown unknown, completely blind. But for racial allies and many people of color, living in a society where white superiority is the norm, is in fact a known for lots of folks. Colored folks, trans folks. It's a known. It's experienced. And we have to learn to live in that experience. The Black Lives Matter slogan speaks directly to omnipresent experiences that white lives are the only lives this society truly values. And increasingly, only white upper class lives matter. Yet bunches of white folks, speaking from their known unknown, insist white lives matter too. What a surprise. As if, let me stop. The data is not hidden. It's seen in access to health care, the state of our public schools, access to pre-K education. It's seen in poverty rates of incarceration, abandoned inner cities, the concentration of environmental hazards in poor people's neighborhoods. Our unknown known, what we pretend not to know, tells us these issues are predominantly about individual choice, about circumstances. It tells us to pay primary attention to the focus on the fact that we've made progress. After all, we've made progress. We've openly gay people in political places. And likewise, we've got Hispanics, Blacks, ignoring all along systemic, embedded social dynamics that allow us to be numb and blind to so very much, to live in the known unknowns. We who believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all people cannot stand on the sidelines or turn our backs to the dramatic increase in income inequality, to Black boys and men being killed by police with impunity, to the equivalence of a life sentence for nonviolent crimes, to a dramatic increase in voter disenfranchisement. We can't stay on the sidelines, folks. All these issues have come together to lay bare our broken social contract, promising liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Much of our ills can be laid at the feet of systemic, embedded racism. I think we should start calling it America's original sin. The time is ripe for us to vigorously engage these issues. Who we believe in the search for truth, we who believe in the search for truth and meaning should be in the forefront of this movement for justice. We who have a history of challenging orthodoxy should lead. May we make it and keep it in our known knowns and take a step at a time to create a better future. May it be so. Amen. Ashe. It's always a good thing when we support the work of this church. Don't miss the opportunity. The ushers will come to you. I know, and I hope you know, this will help feed the work of who we are and who we are becoming. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Terry Smith here for the Caring Committee. I have a few items to share with you today. If you have a milestone or special joy or concern you'd like to have shared with the congregation, you can contact a member of the Caring Committee. Sally Garber is our chair, or send the information to the church office. The book is available through the week if you want to write in here, and we try to keep it on the altar before and after service. Mary Benke is recovering. She broke her pelvis due to a fall. She's still at Woodland Hills on Ogden Road, so please keep her in your thoughts. And think warm thoughts, please, for Michael Adams and Jim Esberg. They are in New England amidst the polar vortex, and they ask for your prayers and concerns for a safe trip home. And finally, we have good news. Hildy Getz had her open heart surgery this past Monday, and happily, she's being moved out of intensive care to the step-down unit. The surgeon said the surgery was complicated, but she's made great progress this week and is looking forward to getting to pick some different kinds of food to eat, so I've been told. And now if you have a silent joy or concern in your heart, this is a time where you're invited to come forward and light a candle and line up at both sides of the altar, please. May our prayers be heard and our hearts uplifted.
Join me for a time of prayer, meditation, and reflection. Great Spirit of the universe, known by many names, by none at all, share this space with us. Make yourself known in any of your ways that you present. Touch our minds, touch our hearts, engage our wisdom, engage our care for fellow travelers. Bring the too often hidden by our busy hands, by our needs and wants, by the hubbub of the world. This is a day for which we should be glad. Glad for knowing we're a part of a greater whole. Glad that there is opportunity to be of use. Glad that our hearts can be opened. Glad that our minds engaged. Knowing there is a place in the universe for each me that's here today. Knowing that we can be of use simply by an awareness of our interconnectedness, simply by allowing our hearts to more often be in the driver's seat, knowing that each one of us matters. Amen.
So we have two announcements for this week. First of all, the youth will be doing a fundraiser, a soup fundraiser. So if you'd like to make a crock pot of your favorite recipe, bring it next week, place it in the kitchen. Also, for those of you interested in purchasing, there will be containers. I believe there are quart containers, so you can purchase some soup to go after next week's service, and that'll be held right in the kitchen. Also, for all of you jigsaw puzzlers, we now have a puzzle sharing system. So in the upstairs hallway, there's a basket on the file cabinet. So you should feel free to take a puzzle, leave a puzzle, borrow one, share a puzzle. It's all there for each of you to enjoy.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, nor the warmth of community, or of the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
We haven't done that before. We haven't done that before. I know, actually, I picked it out and I had it out Wednesday. But I'll show you the culture. His wife wrote his poem, and he just named everything after her poets. And her poets reminded her of what she called some stuff like